with ABC USA Churches and the Creation Justice Network. And they work on building content, and they're part of Eco America. And they build the content based on people who do research in the area of science, climate change, and things like that. But they also have a focus on creation justice. As the Sunday before Earth Day, Pastor shared a video with us introducing the Creation Justice Network. This is not showing anything, Cindy. I'm going to go back to what I have because this. No, keep talking. You keep talking. No, you're just showing the slide master. Okay. You keep talking. Keep talking. No, I can't. I'm pulling this up. I'll put it in normal. Hey, this is the best I can do. Can you see the slides again?
Yes.
All right. So you're going to see the notes and stuff that they provide below, but we'll move on to the next slide, and we'll start with a prayer. So the opening prayer that I chose is Job 12:7-10. And it says, "But ask the animals, and they will teach you, the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and they will teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of God, of the Lord, has done this? In God's hands, the life of every living thing and every breath of every human being." So I started talking a little bit about this. I've been trained as a Blessed Tomorrow climate change ambassador. We're partnering with American Baptist Churches USA, and I am a member of the Creation Justice Network Steering Committee. The Creation Justice Network is trying to encourage individuals and congregations to answer God's call to tend, love, and care for the creation of all people, creation and all people. Blessed Tomorrow is part of Eco America, and they're the part of Eco America that works with the faith communities. They work with all denominations of churches, and through them we can be connected with churches other than Baptists. As an introduction, you know me, but I wanted to give you some information about me that's changed since I retired. One is, I already told you, I'm a member of the Creation Justice Network Steering Committee. I'm an ambassador. And the third thing that you may not know is I'm pursuing a climate change certification at Penn, and I'm taking my first class this summer. And a scripture that motivates me around this work is Job 38:4, where God asked Job, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand." And to me, my hope is to better understand what God wants me to know about his creation and what he wants me to know about how to care for it. And if you read the rest of the scripture beyond that, God gives Job examples about how he did this and the dimensions and how he kept the water where it's supposed to be. And the message is, do you understand that this is my creation? What I like to cover today will be, I like to spend a little time connecting our faith with creation care. Talk a little bit about how climate change impacts the ministries we do. Talk about some climate solutions that can benefit us all, and then spend a little bit of time talking about what we can do in faith or as a faith community. So the first thing we'll talk about faith and creation care. The scripture I chose here is Genesis 1:28. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth on the earth." I just asked if anybody wants to comment on these questions, but three questions came to mind. The first one is, what does this blessing from God mean to you? What does it mean for us to subdue the earth? And how are we to have dominion over the animals? Any comments or any thoughts? Hey, upgrade, it should be bigger. So does anybody think that this is a blessing, that God gave us dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air? And what do you think it means when he said to subdue it?
Oh, this is Jim. I'm not crazy about this passage. I prefer the one in the next chapter of Genesis, because that subdue and have dominion has been interpreted by a great many evangelicals to mean that it's our responsibility to destroy the earth. And I don't agree with that.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
I don't, in one sense, I agree with Jim. So I don't want to see subdue and dominion in a negative way, but I've just spent the day working outside in our yard, and you look at the weeds and you try to make the peas grow and not the weeds. And, think about having a pet. I have dominion over that pet. It's a loving kind of dominion, but I see these words that way.
I have done some research on this verse, Jim and Miriam and others, and I will share a little bit of with you. Some thoughts on what this says is dominion means to rule over, but God has sovereign authority over his creation. Our authority was delegated to us by God. So this authority comes with a responsibility to rule well. Being made in God's image, we have the responsibility to act as God would act. These are my thoughts on it. Because I had the same issue. When I read dominion, I looked it up. When I read subdue, I looked it up. And then I started researching it. Yes, we have these responsibilities given to us, but we are in God's image and we need to act as God would act. So the next question I asked, well, how would God act? I don't know if this is right. What would he want us to do? I think we're to act in a way that we represent God in this world. We're supposed to be caretakers of God's creation. We're supposed to use his creation wisely. We're never to be cruel, selfish, or wasteful of God's creation. We're never to misuse and mistreat God's creation, as I would think God would not do these things to his own creation. So if you realize this authority was given by God and that we're supposed to behave like God, then this dominion is a great responsibility for us to care for his creation. And that's the message I'm trying to give out of this scripture. One of the things God does, and I've shared this thoughts with a lot of people, it came to the realization through my yoga practice, when one day I realized that my lungs are completed by the plants, and without plants, my lungs are useless. And I breathe in a concert with every plant in the world. And as I destroy plants or destroy the environment, I'm destroying my lungs. And I think God does this. He has us intimately connected with his creation, that ultimately we can't destroy it without destroying ourselves. So our dominion seems like it should line up with what God would want us to do, is to care for his creation wisely. This is where the video is, but because we had a lot of delays, you saw this video before. I'm going to just move on where I kind of summarize some of the points to the video. Climate change is a moral issue. The vulnerable are most at risk. We can make a difference. Climate solutions can help everyone. And whatever transition we do, it must be just. And I think those were the main messages that were given in the video, and I'll just summarize them here. So let's look a little bit about how climate impacts our ministries. Corey, this is where I like you to run the survey. So there's
Okay.
four questions, and we're going to run it as a quick survey. The first one is, what is causing our climate change?
Right.
Can you put that up again?
Let me see if I can relaunch it. Hang on. It'll clear. Let me have everybody answer again if you've already answered.
Yeah, okay. Oh man. I went to take it off mute and it went away. But when I clicked in my answer, it wouldn't allow me to hit submit.
Okay. Well, we'll just see what happens with the next one.
So it's a combination of mostly humans in both were the answers. Let's try the next one.
Okay. Point two.
Burning fossil fuel is mostly okay, mostly unhealthy. I don't know.
Oh,
So
okay.
this looks like 100% mostly unhealthy. Next one is, how concerned are you about climate change? A lot, somewhat, a little, not at all. So we got a lot and somewhat, almost balanced. And the last question is, do you believe you can make a difference? And everybody thinks they can make a difference. So we'll move back to the slideshow, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
No problem.
Yep. It worked out smoother than we thought it might. You're going to give me back control, I guess.
You should still have control.
All right, so not letting me move. All right, we're moving. So here's a little bit of data. I'm not going to go through the detail, but what is causing our climate change? Burning fossil fuels. There's people who will argue about this, but the data here shows that as we use more and more fossil fuels and we create more and more emissions, the Earth is getting warmer. And when we talk about climate, we're talking about the average of weather. We're not talking about whether it was cold one day or warm another. We're talking about the average of all the weather. So the average temperature now is about 1 degree warmer than it was before we started pumping all this CO2 into the atmosphere. So there seems to be a reasonably strong cause and effect relationship here. How concerned are you about climate change? It turns out most people think that people are not as concerned. So if you ask, 74% of the people have some concern or very concerned. In our group, it was everybody has some concern. Do you think other people are concerned? People think other people aren't as concerned. And because of that, they don't engage people because they have the impression that a lot of people aren't concerned. Can I make a difference? And I say, yes, of course you can. And start by talking about it so you don't feel overwhelmed. One of the biggest things that people studying and finding out is people don't talk about it. 70% of the people rarely or never talk about global warming with their family or friends. Most people feel overwhelmed and that there's no solutions. And because of this, it kind of gets people frozen in place. When you're overwhelmed, it's often a time that you react by doing nothing. You kind of shut down. So one of the things that the Creation Justice Network's trying to do is get congregations to start talking about it. So you don't feel overwhelmed. You become part of a group. The only way you tackle big, tough problems is with teamwork. Nobody individually can do climate change work alone. So I think that's an important learning that we need to talk about. The next slide is that one of the things that makes climate change confusing and hard is that it depends on where you live, how you see it. So if you live in these different regions, the Northeast, the Northwest, et cetera, Alaska, or on an island, you see climate change effects very differently. So in future conversations, I'd like to talk about these different regions. For now, I'm just going to illustrate with the Northeast and the Southwest. The Northeast is because that's where we live. The primary impacts we're seeing are extreme weather events, warmer temperature, lower air and water quality, and sea level rise. Some secondary impacts, some of our farming communities are being affected, and like anywhere else, forests are being affected negatively. To illustrate some scientific data behind this is that the sea levels are rising and the ocean is getting hotter as it holding more and more heat. So a combination of melting ice and expansion of the water from warming. And the other thing is becoming acidic as it absorbs more and more CO2. In the Southwest, California and the Southwest, they have different set of concerns. They have drought, wildfires, heat waves, poor air qualities. They have a big issue with the agriculture in California being affected by the rising temperature. We have significant indigenous people that are being impacted by it. We hear about with COVID with the Indian nations just outside of in Arizona. And they have sea level rise effects on the ocean in California. Some data here shows that the number of wildfires and the size of them and the amount of acreage they're burning each year is increasing. We know that Australia has been under fire. Last year, California had tremendous fires. So what's going on near us? I looked up and did some research. The local impacts that are in literature put out by Delaware agencies is we have rising temperatures, precipitation pattern change. We have sea level rise at our beaches. We have shoreline homes and buildings being threatened. We have coastal ecosystems that are being broken down. We have salt water that's coming up into our rivers. We have new diseases coming into our environment as Zika and different mosquito-borne diseases are coming our way, and then general asthmatic and other health issues caused by changes in climate. What's important now is to look at, and we can't do all these ministries. Again, this is something for future discussion. But the statement made here is because we care about these things, we care about our changing climate, the quality of our water, migration of people and the movement of refugees, poverty. I was just on a talk about poverty today with a Latino group talking about how like 80% of the farm workers who are Latino are being affected by climate and negative health problems with COVID. It's gender specific. Women seem to be more greatly affected by it. We have health issues, food shortages causing hunger. As people are forced to move from one place to another, it creates possible conflicts. It's clearly from the studies that poor people and brown and people of color are more affected by it. It affects our economics by storms destroying property and causing huge expenses to repair it. And we have ministries that address many of these areas. So I pick a couple: hunger and clean water, because we work with a homeless community. We have had food closet, and we do food campaigns. Climate change is causing our water and food quality to decline. Droughts are leading to smaller crop yields, and we're having more waterborne diseases. We look at another ministry where we deal with vulnerable people in our population, refugees and homeless. These things attack the poor and the homeless and the people who live in more impoverished areas to a greater extent than it. And this is data. You can look at the data. They're affected more than people of wealth who can choose to live or locate themselves away from it. Similar to the COVID virus, the wealthier people tended to be able to work from home. What I was told on today's call, that 90% of the Latino population is considered essential workers. So they've been going to work every day during the pandemic. This is one of the reasons why they're being more greatly affected by it. Race is an ongoing issue, and we're feeling it all around us today. Race and systematic redlining and things like that locates poor people and impoverished people near the power plant, near the oil refinery. And on today's call, they shared about another cancer hotspot identified near an oil refinery where a lot of poor people live, and they're breathing the fumes released by the processing, and now there's a cancer cluster there. So the thing about climate solutions, it's very positive. Al Gore, in one of his things, says that we can create from wind energy alone 40 times the total energy we need if we just wanted to go that. There are groups who have identified 100 solutions for climate change that would more than solve the problem. So it's not a lack of having things that we can do, it's the will to choose to do them. But it's important, whatever solutions we put out there, that it benefits all. The more you can meet everybody's need by your solutions, the better. The drivers of our changing climate are transportation is 29% for us. Electricity production is 28% of the cause. Industry is 22%. What we do in our commercial and residential buildings, and then agriculture. I'm going to talk about just 3 of these. If we look at transportation, if we can become more efficient in our transportation, use electrified cars, improve our shipping, choose to use alternative ways to move, like one of the speakers I listened to, organize our travel in a way we minimize excessive airplane trips and things like that. Those are things we can do, but other things have to be do is we have to look at changing this whole infrastructure, how we move things around. And you see some major corporations are going to electric vehicle truck fleets and things like that. And those are the type of things that we can do to address that. For energy production, electricity, solar prices are now dropped 70% since 2010. And in most regions of the country, solar energy is competitive with electricity produced by any other method. I put in here, added this red box just to let you know, Delaware is one of the least solar friendly states. New Jersey is much more solar friendly. I learned this because I'm in the process of putting solar panels on our house. But there's a bill right now, 250, that's trying to correct some things. But if this bill doesn't get passed, the solar industry in Delaware, which is already not that great, will basically be shut down. Wind energy, I suggested already, can meet all the energy needs if we were to go all to wind. Now, there's some complications. You can't put wind turbines everywhere, but the potential to meet our energy needs without fossil fuels is there. And then what can you do in your own home and in buildings? I'm not going to go through this, but there's a hierarchy of things you can do. And there's plans and information that we can work through at another time to look at things that we can do in our own life or in our church to improve our energy efficiency and our carbon. And this chart's trying to say that climate solutions have a lot of co-benefits. So if you improve your energy, you create local jobs, you improve your air quality if you were to go to electric, more solar and wind generation techniques. If you cut the amount of energy you import, you'll cut your fuel bills, and you could cut traffic jams if you would start using more public transportation. And you can protect from extreme weather that would give you more biodiversity, because right now certain species of plants are dying off because we are changing our weather, and it would improve your water quality. Bottom line is that any climate solutions have to be just. We need to retain jobs, and we can't. We have to retrain people who are going to lose their jobs as you move from one industry to another. We got to go back and remediate toxified lands that we polluted. We have to build new infrastructure to move this new type of energy around our country. And we have to share equitably in the benefits of taking these actions. At this point, ask, does anybody have any questions before I go into the last part? Or any comments? Okay, so what can we do in faith? This is the thinking of the Creation Justice Network, Blessed Tomorrow. It talks about three things we can do: stewardship and mitigation of the problem, creating refuge for an adaptation to when the problems come, and then witness and have advocacy. And it has this: if you take it, if you do stewardship and you improve it, it prepares you to be a refuge for other people. It ignites your willingness to witness about what can be done, and it spreads the stewardship to others. And that's the kind of the way you think about it. Doing the stewardship authenticates what we're saying. We're walking the talk. We're not just saying, oh, we should do these things, but we're not doing it. Through our witness, we can proclaim it, and then through offering ourselves as a refuge, it strengthens our stewardship. So let's look at this a little bit more. One of the things that we're going to look at is becoming a creation justice congregation. No decision will be made at this point. This is a copy of the brochure that they have produced, and it's got way too much for anybody to read. So on the next chart, I kind of pick out some key points. If we become a creation justice network, we'll spend time on environmental education. We will take time to learn about what we're doing and how it affects God's creation. We will identify and have opportunities to do stewardship, to improve how we use God's creation. And we will be able to look at how this is affecting our justice ministries and the ministries we do to help the least. If we take equal justice measures, they can be in our church, our buildings, it could be an outreach. The whole thing they talk about has a 3-stage process. You work through one stage to the next. Obviously, we would start at stage 1. And it gives you this opportunity to build community partnership beyond just our own church, to connect with the same way we do on Code Purple and connect with other Baptist churches and other denominations. So what are some of the things we can do? We could be thankful for the goodness of God's creation. We can pray for his guidance. We can find support in talking with each other. We can assemble a creation care team of members of the church, community leaders, to think about what our church might do next. We can plan using the resources Blessed Tomorrow provides us. We can start doing some inexpensive things, some which we already do, having recycling in our church and things like that. We can take whatever savings we get and roll them forward into new ministries. A couple of churches I've talked to have put solar on their churches, and they don't have any electric bill anymore. And I'm learning a lot about that, so we could talk about, is that a choice we might want to do? We can make a public commitment that we can speak out and communicate about this being important to us as a faith community. If we do creation stewardship, is mitigation the problem. The history and the plan that they've seen is you start out baselining where you are, you do conservation improvements, you go to renewables and offsets, and over a period of years, you see it's not already done in the first year. You reduce your footprint. This year, you can see this is a multi-year plan. You can become a refuge, and we do this kind of with Code Purple. You look at when a climate event happens, a hurricane hits our region, you have a response plan in place. You're there to provide relief for maybe days or long term. And you are providing these people a way to adapt through a crisis. And your outreach is prepared and ready for when the event happens, instead of responding at the last minute. You can witness or advocate, and it kind of goes through a few steps here. The first thing is you have to become literate and know what you're talking about. And that's what I'm doing. You've got to understand how climate relates to your faith. That's what I'm working on and trying to share with you. Then you have to elevate your voice in your community. Then you got to go out and talk to leaders in your community to impart change. And then you may take it yourself, and your voice may. And you start at the beginning by learning. So I'm going to make one ask in this Bible study. I'm going to ask if you'll join me, or not everybody, but some people will join me to put together this creation care team. The goal of this creation care team will be to work on this information, look at the tremendous amount of information that is provided to us on how to do this. There's brochures and detailed documents that we can use. We don't have to figure it out. A lot of this work has already been done. And then that team's goal would be to propose what the next steps for our church would be, and take that to our congregation for approval agreement. And when I think about this, I shared this with some of my friends who are struggling with the protest and what's going on, and saying we can't change it. It's too big. And I took this quote and sent it to them, and I sent both of these. I said, take Amos 5:24, the quote that's on the Southern Poverty water fountain that flows in front of their building down in Alabama. But let justice roll like a river, righteousness like a never failing stream. And then I added to it this thought: let's not forget that even a river of righteousness is made up of drops of water. Each of us may only be a drop. As we flow together, we can become a river. So you don't have to tell me now, but if you're interested in joining me on this, and Pastor is supportive of it, let me know, and we can begin working offline and begin talking about it more. So I like to close with a prayer that comes out of 2 Corinthians 13:8. Oh, do you want to ask questions before I close? I'm sorry. I'll back up. Anybody have any questions or any interest in this?
Under this is starting, under the, when you mentioned in Delaware and talked about the environment here, that the climate is changing, what specifically would you be focusing on?
For Delaware,
Yes.
I think that would be decided by the team. I think what I can tell you what I've focused on.
Yeah.
I'm putting solar panels on my house. I've got a vehicle that's electric, and my next car will be electric.
No,
I'm saying that the church will decide what they'll do through this creation care team. But these are all, I mean, whether it makes sense to do solar on our church or not, that would take study. I can't say it makes. You know, what we could do in advocating the community, there's plenty of opportunities. We would have to decide.
And that's what I'm talking about. As an advocate, what would you suggest? I understand that the church will make the decision, but what would you suggest? Not what you're doing personally.
Well, I would say that as a faith community, communicate with our congressman that we don't understand why Delaware is such a lagger in solar power. Why New Jersey is going like crazy. You don't have any solar installing companies in Delaware because they can't make money here. They're all in Jersey. I know that because I have friends who work in the industry. So why is Delaware lagging behind? If we think it's important, we can speak to them. We can advocate for things like that. We can look at doing like a church that I'm aware of that puts solar panels on the church, and they get all their power from solar panel. And the research I've done is the return on the investment is good. So it's not like a losing investment. It's a good investment. That's why I'm doing it on my house. You can look. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. You mentioned the what is it? The wind panel. Is that what it's called? Out
The wind turbine.
The wind turbine. Out. It's not successful here. You're saying that's not a good investment to have that.
Well, solar panels, the state does not do a lot to incentivize.
Yeah.
We're not a good, at this point. In fact, there's legislation that if it isn't passed this month, will cripple the solar industry in the state. It will cost.
Yeah, years ago, the organization I was with, we worked with Safer Chemicals, Healthy Family, obviously the Sierra Club, and it was Blue Wind. They were here years ago, but then you have Delmarva, who have all this money, and every time we went out to educate people, they were right there convincing the politician why none of the bills had passed then. So it is really hard because you're fighting against these big companies that pretty much control our politicians here. So it sounds like a good, because like even not far from where I am, Route 9 is the cancer cluster area. So, and it's all about educating people, but every time we went out there to educate people, you have those companies right down here, what's that, right off 495, they were there giving those community money, and it just kind of pushed us out.
Yeah, and that's why if you try to do it as the individual drops of water will fail. And that's why we have to not just be our own church, we have to connect with other churches, and we have to grow the community. And one of the things that I'm learning as I'm studying this is that most people don't know much about it. And I'll tell you, I thought I knew a lot about it. I didn't know hardly anything about it. So by being naive, the power brokers that you described could take advantage of us. And they continue. So I agree with you. We have to educate. Any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, Alan, this is Richard. Right now, you can go to clean energy by just switching who you get your energy from through Delmarva. So you don't have to get clean energy. You don't have to get solar panels or anything. You can just switch to a company who provides.
Yes, I know that, and I've done that.
Okay, I'm just saying. So
yeah, I know that, but what I want to do is I want to add to the solar footprint. So if you look at what Germany, go ahead.
Why wouldn't that be adding to the solar footprint if I am getting my power from someone who is using that, doing that?
Because the total green power in Delaware is 3%. That's how much we get from green right now.
Yeah.
So right now, yeah.
So, if everybody just right now, without doing anything, switched, that would change.
Right, and I've done that, and you pay a.
But I haven't. I'm just saying. I just got something from them, and I saw it again, and I haven't done it. But that's one thing you can do, and it doesn't cost you anything.
Right, and I paid a premium for it more than it cost me in this case. So by putting my panels in, I'm doing one step more. But you don't have to. That's certainly something to do, because the more people who do that, the better. 100% agree with you. I just decided to go one step further, but you don't have to do that. You can drive them to only want green power. If everybody only wanted green power, eventually they can't run the coal plants. The problem is, and this is what Darlene was talking about, only a few percent of people are doing that, and it's not enough to move anything.
Alan,
but it's a good point. Yes.
Okay, Tom here. And the theory goes like this. As people of means, more and more people of means start installing solar panels on their roof, generating their own electricity, there is less demand for conventionally generated power. Therefore, the conventionally generated power, the price starts going up and up. Therefore, the disadvantaged people we're just forcing them into a greater sense of poverty while we think that we are helping the environment.
No, that's not necessarily true, because there's an organization in Baltimore that I've learned about, P52, where what they're doing is bringing into impoverished neighborhoods solar power by building solar farms and then generating the power and then having it go into the impoverished communities. I agree with you. If we played a game the way Delmarva wants us to play, yes. But there are people, and that's what we have to learn. I knew none of this stuff until I started educating myself. There are people who are figuring out ways to address these problems that are just and address the vulnerability of the people. We don't know them, so we can't practice them. I just learned about this group in Baltimore, that their mission, excuse me, my phone's going off. Their mission is to generate, one of their main missions is to generate solar power, and it all goes into impoverished communities. And they've been doing this. I didn't know they've been doing it 80 miles from me. I didn't even know. They've been doing it for years, and they're successful.
They did it here in the northeast of Wilmington, and it didn't last long. P52?
Yes.
They were here. John Blyden was the leader of that. and they did a whole block, which was great. But when they ran out of money, they didn't continue to work. And we didn't have our legislators to support them because they were expecting the legislators to put money on the side so they can continue the project.
Yes, and this is one of the things, and this is what's so important in this conversation. This is not a problem just for scientists. Often people say, well, that's a science problem. It's not a problem for scientists. This is a social problem. This is a way we choose to be a society problem. Science can do a piece. They can come up with things. They can come up with solutions. They can look at the science of the problem. Darlene said, it's bigger. If you want it to happen, it's bigger. And I think that's why we're coming at, as American Baptist churches, we're coming at it not as a climate advocacy group. We're coming at it from a creation justice point of view. And we're driven by what can we do to help do what we've been told in the Bible. And that's, so it's got a different focus. We may have to advocate for laws, there are all kinds of things we have to do, but the premise is that we want to do this in a way that climate change, we can clearly see affects different people differently. I'm going to have a great example. The people with means are going to be able to create solutions for themselves. But this is a bigger than that. And that's why I've got caught up in this. Because as I've learned this, and this is where people like Darlene knows this by what she does, I'm learning as a scientist, a lot of this is new stuff for me to learn. But that's why I need partners like Darlene who advocate for things, who know things. Because this is not a science problem. So if you're sitting here saying, I'm not a scientist, no, don't do that. This is a social problem. And if you live in this society, you can be one of the drops of water that coalesces into this river. If we can get a big enough river, righteousness will flow. But if we don't, we allow them to can keep us as individual drops of water and keep us separated, we'll evaporate and die. We've got to come together and we have to become a river of righteousness. Any other thoughts or questions? Because we're running out of time. I would say that I hope with Pastor that we'll continue these type of conversations. Again, the purpose of this was to connect this to our faith, show that there are solutions, and begin to look at what we can do as a faith community and then how we can partner with other faith communities, other organizations. So to try to stay on time, I will move on to the closing prayer if there's not another question. So the closing prayer I chose is based on 2 Corinthians 13:8. Pastor actually used this in last week's sermon. For we cannot do anything against truth, but only for the truth. One of the things that has come out in my studies is that there are a lot of people propagating misinformation and lies so they can profit now. And the truth, I use a quote from Mark Twain that says, a lie is halfway around the world when the truth is still trying to put its shoes on. Lies spread for some reason differently than truth. Truth gets questioned. But at the end, God tells us, and we know this, that the truth will prevail. What I'm looking for through this prayer and asking, can we be part of having the truth win? So my prayer is, Lord, we pray and trust that through you, the truth about climate change and how it affects our lives and our ministries will be revealed. I pray that you will move others to join me to assemble a creation care team to determine our next step. I ask that you guide this care team as they explore Calvary becoming a creation justice. Amen. I thank everybody for your time.